Hello and welcome to the Tribal Council podcast, where on this podcast, Survivor represents our life, and when it is gone, so are we. My name is Ethan Kronk, and I'm joined by my co-host, Connor Boudreau. How are you today, Connor?
I'm pretty excited. This was quite an interesting episode. A very, I guess, unpredicted arc for what was previously discussed. It wasn't really something that was necessarily brought up a ton. And I think it was full of some pleasant surprises and some unpleasant ones to boot.
Well, first off, a little bit of an unpleasant surprise for me, at least. D. Vidares went home. I was hoping, honestly, that it would be Coach, but, between blindsiding Charlie and in turn betraying Jonathan, to just not really playing the whole situation with Rizzo's idol all too well, telling, at least one too many people, I guess, and, getting caught in that. She did kind of do it to herself a little bit. She kind of had it coming, but that doesn't make it any less tragic for me, considering I was kind of cheering for D, at least to go further than she did. But at the end of the day, on a tribe of 14, to be the one person that, for the most part, people can unanimously agree, yeah, it'd be okay if she goes home, is not a great look. And it does make me wonder what's in the future for Tiffany's game. I feel like Tiffany's probably not much longer for the game, considering her only ally at this point is technically Aubrey, but realistically, who's to say? I guess, actually, that does lead into Tiffany, but if you have anything you want to add on about D, we can hear that first.
Just two quick fun facts that I was going to throw on there. Because of her elimination, for obvious reasons, no sole survivors that are in the game. This does also mean that every player remaining is unique to their original season. No player that exists in the game has a player from their original season still participating at this point going forward. D is also the first winner since Aris and Tina from the Blood vs. Water season to serve on a jury with other returning players who have never won. It's been that long since we've had this situation occur, where a winner is on a jury with non-winners going into the final three.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah, I guess in Game Changers, none of the winners make it quite far enough, so that'd be almost half of the history of the show as well. But almost, not quite. So that's a neat statistic. But we move on and we talk about Tiffany, who, as of this episode, isn't actually being purpled, so that's good for her. She got 3 confessionals this episode. Kind of unfortunate to get the bulk of your content during episodes where your 2 closest allies go home. That might honestly point towards an even worse edit for Tiffany than if she had just been straight up under-edited, because usually you almost want to be under-edited when things like that happen. They say that you're being shielded in the edit. Tiffany is very much not being shielded in the edit. She's being given plenty of content when her allies are going home, and then no content otherwise, and that's just kind of a terrible sign. So I'm glad she's getting more content. I do enjoy seeing Tiffany on my screen. I do think she's more entertaining than a lot of people give her credit for, but it doesn't actually necessarily even bode well for her edit, and she was already clearly at the bottom of the list, so she's not going to be moving up at all, unfortunately. And what are your thoughts on Tiffany, Connor?
Yeah, I think we can kind of, I think we can kind of come to conclusion of something that's very rare in Survivor. In this situation, I think if Tiffany leaves the bottom of the list, it will be a thoroughly impressive feat that for the rest of this season, she isn't just last on both of our lists. Because truly, at this point, very clearly, as you mentioned, she's not being shielded by the edit, she's being shafted by it. There's just nothing about the edit that is playing of any benefit to making some reasonable belief that her winning game isn't genuinely the worst we've ever seen in terms of how they portrayed it via edit. So, like, the fact that she's not New Era Purpled, congrats. It's a real shame, though, what's happened, considering Tiffany was already someone that some people didn't want to see again or wasn't sure if she should come back. And I was like, you know what? I enjoyed Tiffany. I'm all for it. This has been a very disappointing showing from what we've been given in the edit.
I mean, Tiffany had a legendary crash out at the beginning of this episode in regards to Camilla going home that I actually thought was pretty entertaining. But that's really all I can say for her. At this point, unfortunately. She's just, again, getting shafted by the edit. And there's really not much to talk about because of it. Again, more content this episode, but again, it's really just the legendary crash out that's like really significant, and then the fact that she tries to keep D around in the game and fails. Just not a great look. Moving on to Chrissy Hoffbeck, who has had like 0, 1, or 2 confessionals every single episode. She's the only player left in the game who is currently being purpled by New Era standards. And the content that she has gotten hasn't necessarily been entirely positive. Some of it has been, some of it maybe not so much. I just don't really see like a real winning story for Chrissy at this point in the game. I guess she's just sort of a number for the Honor and Integrity Alliance, which ultimately shouldn't be controlling things necessarily. Like, yeah, Dee went home, and it was what Jonathan and Coach wanted, but she didn't go home because it was what Jonathan and Coach wanted. She went home because people like Rizzo and Suri were willing to let her go at the end of the day, because those are really the people in the game right now that are in power. So from an edit standpoint, there's really no reason to think Chrissy's going to win. From a gameplay standpoint, you know, she's kind of not necessarily in the greatest position. So all in all, she's kind of just bound to be near the bottom of this list for me. What do you think, Connor?
Yeah, with Tiffany, I would say potentially the worst edited season ever for a winner, and I could argue that Chrissy Wynn would also be in that ballpark of it could be the worst by edit standards winning game we've ever seen. But with Tiffany, I genuinely don't see how Tiffany gets the end and wins. With Chrissy, I see a single situation in my mind. Somehow, we end up a situation, it's a trio of honor and integrity people, probably including Coach and Jonathan, where they've pissed off the jury so much that it's like, all right, who is the only other person that's not these two? They win the game. That is the situation I see working out right now for Chrissy. Because again, the edit is doing us zero to consider her a legitimate winner at this point. 2 confessionals is their peak number for Chrissy. I guess Chrissy must have just not said anything entertaining for like 20-something days, because like how that's all we're getting of Chrissy is surprising to me. But you know what? I don't edit the show. I don't have any control over it. I can only, you know, I guess decide based off what I've seen. And what I've seen is that Chrissy is not winning Survivor this season.
Or probably ever, for that matter. I don't think I don't necessarily see a third Chrissy game in the books. So, Chrissy fans, do not rejoice. On to Joe Hunter, who really this episode didn't get anything. He got his first ever Zero Confessional episode, not in his Survivor career, mind you, but on season 50. Yeah, Joe has mostly just had negative content for the parts of the season that he's been relevant, which was really just the first couple episodes. And since the first couple episodes, if you take those first couple episodes out, he has been purpled. By New Era standards, those first two episodes are keeping him out of that range, confessional wise, and will probably continue to keep him out of that range, unless he continues to get skunked multiple times somehow. But so from a confessional standpoint, things aren't looking great for Joe. From a gameplay standpoint, again, he's part of that Honor and Integrity Alliance, and he is really not liked at all by Rick Devens. Christian doesn't have any real intention of ever working with Joe, I don't think. I'd be surprised if Emily ever wanted to work with Joe. So at the end of the day, he's just not in a good position, and his edit kind of sucks. I don't really see a world where Joe wins this season, or even necessarily comes particularly close, and that's why I have him as low as I do.
And I have an interesting thought for what Joe could become for the season. I can't say that there's any necessary proof to it, but hypothetically, I think we could be looking at possibly the first ever multi-time runner-up of the New Era. I could see a very real world where he just kind of gets brought to the end of the third place, kind of something of a Tarzan Game Changers.
I just don't really think that anybody who's set up to win at this point is necessarily looking at Joe as an ally or somebody that they're going to bring super far into the game. So I don't necessarily see that happening for Joe. I kind of feel like he'll just be a relatively early merge boot, kind of coming up within the next couple episodes here, would be my guess. But at the end of the day, either way, I don't think he's winning. That much I can say for sure. And yeah.
We've established a pretty clear theme that he's just not in any contention, really.
And, there's just really not much else to talk about with Joe, considering he got 0 confessionals. So, I think we can move on and talk about Coach Wade. Coach, I feel like got a really negative episode this time around. His haikus that just weren't haikus were definitely something interesting. I mean, just complete utter failures as far as haikus go, actually. He had 6 syllables, I believe, then 8 syllables, and then finally 5. He got 1 out of 3 lines right. And he was so proud of himself. That's not good content. He probably came up with at least one haiku that was an actual haiku, and they could have showed that, but instead they were like, let's show the one that doesn't actually qualify. Which, by the way, elementary schoolers can write haikus. So, that really is embarrassing, for Coach there. But aside from being terrible at poems, he's also just kind of not great at Survivor. From the looks of things, he just can't suppress the Dragon Slayer. It came out this episode and just pissed everybody off. He pissed Emily off, pissed, Dee, but I guess she's gone. Pissed off Tiffany for sure. pissed off the Riz God. Kind of just pissed off probably everybody to some extent, but mainly those people that I mentioned. And when you have a bunch of people just pissed off at you, and you have pissed off Rick Devens majorly as well. And when you have this many people just completely pissed off at you, and this many powerful players completely pissed off at you, there's just really not much hope at the end of the day. So, well, Coach has had decent points in his edit throughout the season. This episode, and the episode where he's so far gotten the most amount of confessionals, was truly a terrible episode, just chock full of negative content, people hating Coach, people not wanting to work with Coach, people trying to potentially make a move on Coach, and, well, it doesn't necessarily go through fully. A next episode, to be honest, I could very well see it happening, depending on what's going on with the twist next episode. But at the end of the day, Coach is just in a terrible position. He really just exposed himself for everyone, and I imagine he'll be a big major target at some point relatively soon. Potentially even an easy consensus target, aside from the fact that maybe Joe and Jonathan want to keep him around, but aside from that, I just don't see how Coach ends up winning this game.
And see, I can't really add much to that, but I did prepare something for today. So let me know when you're ready for that.
I was born ready.
Sure, he did succeed. His haikus were not that good. Coach Wade's odds are bad.
Wow. Not a great haiku, but at least it was a haiku. You know, that's all I can ask for at this point. My standards, Coach has lowered my standards quite significantly. Also,
just make sure for the video we add some like snapping sounds in there, you know.
Oh yeah.
Totally.
I don't know if my mic is even picking that up.
Yeah, no.
But
totally just a quick little point. Honestly, this is the Coach I wanted to see because I knew this isn't the Coach that was going to win. And I was like kind of taken aback by the first couple episodes. I was like, okay, Coach is actually playing a good game. No, the Dragon Slayer's back, and I love it.
I also enjoy the Dragon Slayer. It's definitely entertaining. Although Jessica, I wish she could be here because she was very adamant that she was no longer entertained by Coach. His shtick has gotten old, I think, for her, which is fair. And hopefully she'll be here for the next episode. I do want to just pull up Coach's haiku because the other thing I wanted to mention about Coach's haiku is that it was very easily fixable as well. Like, you could have very easily just done a couple things and it would have been a proper haiku. I think unfortunately I'm not finding it anywhere in writing. So basically it was something along the lines of betrayal all around, no one tells the truth like Coach. And then I forget what the last line was, and it was the only line that was actually correct. But he could have said betrayal abound. Sorry, he says nobody tells the truth like Coach. If he had said no one tells the truth like Coach, that would have worked. He could have said betrayal abound, no one tells the truth like Coach, and then whatever his last line was, and that would have been a proper haiku. It's just slight tweaks that he could have done to make it a proper haiku. It would have been so fucking easy. But he can't count syllables, apparently. Now, is that the most important thing about his game this season? Probably not. But I thought it was worth talking about.
I have one last thing prepared before we move on.
Okay. Spit it.
His shtick can't grow old. He is the Dragon Slayer. Entertained the fans.
Snap, 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 snap. Moving on to Stephanie LaGrossa Kendrick. Stephanie honestly got some pretty good content this episode. All things considered, the journey was obviously kind of mandatory content for her, and she was obviously going to be portrayed positively considering she won it. So honestly, was this even a great episode for Stephanie? Because that's just kind of a non-factor, I feel like, edit-wise. And then she comes back, tells her lie about what actually happened, and immediately Suri does not believe her. Ultimately, I don't know. I think this was kind of a mediocre episode for Stephanie now that I think about it. And I never really had too much confidence in Stephanie in the first place. So she kind of just stays here. At the end of the day, you know, good for her. She got an advantage. Steal a vote could be pretty powerful depending on how things play out. But ultimately, I just don't have too much confidence in Stephanie. I don't think her edit is all that great. And, you know, the little glimmer of positivity that we got for her edit this episode, I don't necessarily think really means all that much. So, but what's your perspective on Stephanie, Connor?
Listen, bitch, she got an advantage. That is one of the funniest things, if not the funniest thing, she has ever done in Survivor. Holy episode for Stephanie relative to the entire rest of the season. Like, we actually got to see Stephanie do something cool. Remind us who Stephanie of old was, why we cared about Stephanie before she spouted her political opinions online. You know, the classic Stephanie showed up for one episode, and it was actually kind of entertaining again. And then I remembered who Stephanie was, and I stopped caring. But she had me for like 2 minutes there.
And she had me for maybe 5 seconds when she said, "Listen, bitch, I got an idol." Or not an idol, an advantage. That was like, that was entertaining. The actual procuring of the idol, I didn't find all that entertaining. I was just like, okay, whatever. But again, I've never really been much of a Stephanie fan, with or without her political opinions factored in. Especially with her political opinions factored in, I'm especially not a fan. But that being said, I don't know. Maybe a good episode for Stephanie, maybe not, considering how easily read she was, at least by Suri. But at the end of the day, even if this was a really good episode for her, I don't think it would move her up on this list more than max for me 1 spot. So, potentially she can move up above the next person that I have on this list, Emily Flippin. Was this a terrible episode for Emily? I don't think so, not by any means. However, Emily has had some terrible episodes. She's had some episodes where she just hasn't been relevant. And then there's this one where, sure, she's kind of relevant. She strongly dislikes Coach. She kind of just wants him gone. Doesn't really follow through with that, but at least we're hearing Emily's perspective. That being said, at the end of the day, her season-wide edit just has not been great. But I'll let you take the floor on Emily. See what do you have to say about her, Connor?
Yeah. I'm much lower on Emily than you are. I'm out on Emily entirely. This is, if not the fourth, at least the third time we've got Emily's perspective of, this is what I want. This is what I think needs to happen. And it doesn't even come close to actually happening. This is the closest she's been to getting what she wants at a vote where she's actually had multiple confessionals genuinely discussing something. I just don't see how that in any way is positive content towards someone's odds of winning, and we can legitimately look at what we've seen and go, yeah, no, that makes sense. I can get it once maybe or twice even where someone says something and they're kind of using it to bluff at the edit maybe, or it's just not that important of a boot in the grand scheme of things towards how their game ends up. But 3 separate occasions where that's happened, I do not think I could overlook that. And then again, she's played fairly messy with constantly telling people secrets. This episode, it's finally not her fault that a secret gets shared, and I was clapping while we were watching the episode, genuinely clapping. So I don't know. It's a shame because Emily is still very entertaining, but her odds and the way that she's played is just not a winning formula right now.
I mean, I guess to kind of push back on that, I don't really feel like this episode really fits into the example of what you were saying, where she was just kind of vaguely saying that she would be willing to, like, gun for coach despite whether it's necessarily good for her game or not. Which doesn't really feel like an actual, like, okay, this is a game move that I'm planning on making. It's more so just a comment on how much she does not like coach. So the idea that that's, like, somehow, like, an inconsistency, like, she doesn't, like, she's saying, like, this is what I want in the game, and then it's not happening. I feel like it's a bit of a stretch. Ultimately, you know, it shows a willingness for her to play the game strategically and not play with her emotions. The fact that she's willing to vote out D, despite her annoyance with Coach. It also does just set up the idea that Coach could be a target this episode, which is pretty necessary considering the fact that it was just obviously either going to be him or D. So I don't really hold that against Emily. And also, like, I guess in the premiere she really pushes for Ozzy to go, and then that doesn't happen. I suppose you could argue the same thing about episode 2, although in that case we're actually shown Emily changing her mind, not just like her saying that she wants something to happen and then it not happening. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I just don't necessarily agree that that's a super consistent theme with Emily's edit. I don't really think the messy gameplay is a super consistent theme, for sure, and that's just not something that you usually want to see out of a winner's edit, which is why she is still in the tier of players that I just don't see having much of a chance. I mean, realistically, the bottom half of this list, I just would be shocked if any of them were to win. But I did kind of want to push back against that particular idea when it comes to Emily's edit, because I just don't think that's necessarily what we're seeing, especially not this episode.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair that we have different perspectives on it. I saw it a little bit differently because the way I looked at it was more, again, she was like so adamant, Coach is the worst. And again, this is like, I guess, the most far-fetched of the examples, but again, there's been several times where she's like, I don't want this person on the beach. They're still on the beach. So to me, that was just the big thing. Like, and again, she's just very messy. Like, it's been shown on multiple occasions where something gets told to her. The next scene we literally see is her telling someone else after she was told not to, and then it passing around to the person it needs to get to for it to go backwards. You know, that was the real, like, points of, like, I don't see how the edit is doing you favors as to why you're going to win.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of for Emily is just that, like, she is enough of a presence on the season that they could give her a satisfying story arc that could lead to a potential win, but we haven't really seen that manifested in any meaningful way yet, so probably not going to happen. Moving on to talk about Rick Devens. Rick, I don't know. It's kind of just stayed like stagnant for me in the sense that like wherever he is on this list mostly depends on other people moving up or down, people moving above him, people moving below him. It's more of that than Rick really moving much. He just kind of is there. He's relevant enough. He has enough confessionals. His content is positive enough, but no particular aspect about Rick's edit is really blowing me away, or really making me feel hopeless about him. The biggest thing is just zero confessionals in episode 4 is technically not a great sign, but at the end of the day, I really like Rick. I think Coach trying to tell Rick, oh, we're not including Christian on this, by the way, was kind of insane. And Rick basically being like, fuck this guy, I want him gone, was fun. Although, it's funny, like, we talk about it with Emily, but that actually was, like, a genuine, I'm gonna set a plan in motion to take out Coach. And then it doesn't happen. So I held that against Rick this episode a lot more than I do against Emily. But that's my 2 cents. What do you think about Rick so far this season, Connor?
Yeah, you mentioned the goose egg, and I wanted to point this out. People that are still left in the game that have 1 or more goose eggs. Prissy, Sari, which we'll get to, Jonathan, we'll also get to, Tiffany, Joe this past episode, and Rick. That's a decent amount of the players, and it's enough that it's like, okay, do what? And Stephanie as well, yes. Where was that? Episode 2, I believe? Yeah, okay, episode 2. So yeah, it's enough players that it's like, okay, I don't know if I should be overlooking this. I don't know if it's something I should consider that heavily when I'm doing my rankings. But then the only thing that really comes to mind is, okay, until this week, most of the players with the zeros were normally near the bottom of my rankings. And it just so happened they had the zeros too. So it made it a weird thing to think about when placing Rick. I kind of have been ignoring it for the most part. The things, however, I have been considering is he's still getting a very high amount of content. He has 27 total confessionals. To my knowledge, I think that's the 3rd or 4th highest total. I think like he's basically right there with Rizzo for 3rd and 4th place. So he has been getting a steady amount, and yet I don't know that enough of it has been a concurrent story as to why we're building up to a Rick win. I think he's been building up to be a big character and a very important piece to some person's story. And for this entire season, that's been showing mostly in favor of him being a piece of the Christian story, right? That he's going to be involved in that. Maybe it's going to be the Aubrey story because of how they have played this lie about the boomerang idol. I don't exactly know how this is going to go into play, but I'm guessing that Rick is going to be the piece that's big for someone's why they win or why they lose eventually. I just can't quite place who or why, because I don't know that Rick's story has been enough about him that I believe it's going to be a Rick winning game from what we've been shown so far. But I still think it could. I think we have also been given just a generally high enough and positive enough amount of content that it could still be that ballpark.
I agree. And moving on to somebody else who, again, I just feel kind of weird about their edit. Well, actually, I don't even feel weird about Rick's edit. I do feel weird about this person's edit. But they had a pretty positive episode, I think, this time around, which is why I moved them up a spot. Aubrey Bracco, the main thing about Aubrey's edit this episode is just that she was kind of basically like, oh, you know, okay, first of all, let's start with the negatives. People did not appreciate her saying that she forgot to play her idol, which, what an insane lie to try to tell you forgot to play your idol. On your 4th season of Survivor is kind of just an insane thing to try to play off. But that being said, the way it's portrayed, we see this kind of get back to Aubrey in like a why like what a dumb thing that I just said sort of way. And she acknowledges that it wasn't the right way to play things off. And she acknowledges that she has to step her game up and that she's going to be kicking her game to high gear, which is definitely the type of content that a winner can get fairly frequently. So if Aubrey does end up winning, I think this episode is really where her winning story arc begins. Which is weird, because you would think that her winning story arc would have something to do with her rivalry with Genevieve, but in reality, I feel like that was just kind of the story that Aubrey was given for the period of time in the game where her winning story wasn't necessarily a thing, right? Like, if she wins, I feel like that's kind of maybe what the Genevieve rivalry was. I don't know. Again, Aubrey's edit is so weird, because again, the Genevieve rivalry felt like it just kind of came and went, and wasn't impactful enough to be part of her winning story, which would make me think that she probably isn't going to win. And on top of that, I just don't think she was really portrayed necessarily in the most positive way for much of the early parts of the season. But then I look at the fact that she hasn't had a Zero Confessional episode, which on this cast is actually rare at this point. It's really just like her, Christian, Coach, Ozzy, Rizzo, and that's it. Those 5.
Emily has also not had a zero.
Oh, Emily.
Weirdly.
Well, yes. She has this moment of like, oh, I need to kick my game to high gear. I've been waffling. That I forgot to play my idol. I was stupid. She has an actual position in the game with like Rick and Christian being very close allies for her, Tiffany being someone she can fall back on. We see her form a relationship with Coach as well. So like in reality, there's a lot going against Aubrey, but there's also a lot going for Aubrey. And at the end of the day, I just don't know how to feel about her. So she fits in to this tier basically along with Rick, and maybe the next person that we're going to talk about, where I just find them kind of hard to place. I just find them kind of hard to really put my finger on what their edit is supposed to be about. But there's nothing negative enough to put them down in like the, Coach, Stephanie, Emily tier, Joe, where they're just like either getting a bunch of negative content or just not super relevant. I don't know. How do you feel about Aubrey's edit this season so far? Because I feel like it's a really weird one.
With Aubrey's edit, something I've noticed is Aubrey is slowly turning more and more into the grumpy old lady, is the way I've described it, where we get this like short, snappy, witty confessional all the time. And it's not all of her confessionals, but probably a third-ish of her 19 confessionals. I would have to guess at least 6, 7, 8 of them are saying this. Great. This. And then that's the end of the confessional. We'll get these long, arcing, story-driven confessionals that are really narrating what's happening in an event, a moment, a scene. Cut to Aubrey. I feel like I'm the leper of my tribe. Damn it. That's the whole confessional. So, it's really weird in that sense for me, too. That, we're getting a good amount of content still. It's giving us something to work with. And yet, it's also so brief. if we looked at total number of seconds for confessionals, Aubrey might have the lowest, other than like Chrissy and maybe Tiffany or maybe Joe for the entire season. Even though Aubrey's number is higher than like Tiffany, basically the same as Stephanie, higher than Jonathan's barely, right? The same ballpark as Sarit. But like, if we just boiled it down to seconds, I bet you Aubrey'd be almost last, if not last, because of just how compact what we're getting from Aubrey is. And yet it's still very interesting at points and driving a narrative that, like you said, maybe it wasn't important, but we had to do something in the early goings for some kind of story for Aubrey. And it just so happened that she had a bit of a rivalry with someone that turns into a really cool final moment.
I will say, looking at the confessional time tracker, Aubrey is fourth last, but she also has basically the same amount of confessional time as Suri. So
that's also surprising.
Yeah,
fair. I don't know if Suri had some more number, but
so really, like, her confessional time is, I don't know, somebody could probably do the math and like figure out the average time per confessional of each player. Maybe she'd be the lowest, I don't know. But that is interesting. The fact that her confessionals seem to be so short. I don't know how well that necessarily bodes for Aubrey. That being said, moving on, talking about Jonathan. Jonathan has also had kind of a weird edit. I feel like there's kind of been some ups and downs. This episode, most of his content was surrounding trying to get D out, and then D went home. So hey, that's honestly pretty good for Jonathan, I guess. But realistically, I just don't know that he's being portrayed necessarily super positively. I feel like he's kind of being portrayed as an asshole, or maybe he just is an asshole, and there's really, it's just not easy to portray him otherwise. I don't know. But like, I don't know, I'm caught between Jonathan being edited positively in the sense that like the things that he wants to happen are happening. He's being shown as like a fairly strategic player, which is good considering that was his main thing coming out was, oh, I'm not just going to be a physical player this time, I'm going to be strategic as well now. So those aspects of his edit are pretty great for him, but then just the overall way that he comes off doesn't feel positive, doesn't feel like someone I would want to root for, or that too many people would necessarily want to root for, and that's probably not a great sign. So I don't know when it comes to Jonathan how to feel necessarily about his overall edit. Obviously, at the end of the day, I chose to put him a little bit higher than the likes of, Aubrey, Rick Devens, but I don't necessarily feel confident in that. I just feel like he has the least amount of like concrete negatives, aside from the one Zero Confessional episode in episode 4, much like Rick Devens. But again, when basically over half the cast, I believe, has a Zero Confessional episode, or about half the cast essentially, I don't weigh it as heavily, I guess. But what do you think about Jonathan, Connor?
With Jonathan, there's a couple things that come to mind right away. First off, technically his big rivalry that he gets in this season kind of comes to a halt with his success of eliminating D after she blindsided him. We got the scene of, will you work with me again? Are we cool? He goes, yep, I totally got this. And he's like, all right, now I have to reevaluate things. Flash forward. first opportunity, there's really a logical chance to make some kind of decision regarding this. He uses a ally to accomplish the goal without dragging full blood onto his hands. Now, he also does something that I don't actually know how clever it, in the grand scheme of things, will turn out to be, but in her exit confessional, Dee specifically says, I think Jonathan got me. He got a fire out of me, right? And Jonathan acknowledges this as well in one of his 2 confessionals, that he was intentionally playing things up to try and get a reaction at Dee because he thought she would give one. And again, how important is this? Was this actually relevant to people's decisions? Did this actually play any part in what actually was shown on screen? I can't fully say yet. I think it's too early to know how important that was actually in the grand scheme of things, or if it is at all. But it's still at least these little tidbits that have been kind of shown to us in the last couple episodes, which I think really is when the movement for both of us pushing Jonathan up our list kind of started. So I don't know if you noticed those as much as I did, but those are something I've definitely been keeping in mind when I've been ranking Jonathan, and like really going over those as like potential building blocks towards a maybe not necessarily a winning game, but a pretty good game in terms of what the edit has shown us so far, in terms of what I can predict, I guess.
Yeah, the main thing for me about Jonathan is just that he's, again, part of this kind of honor and integrity alliance that I don't necessarily see controlling the game moving forward or being like the prevailing alliance. But yeah, between kind of getting Rise out of D intentionally and letting, also just like telling Coach that D said, I don't trust Coach, and letting Coach be the one to really push D's name as much as he did, we're seeing little, like, again, tidbits of strategy from Jonathan that we didn't see on season 42, and that does definitely bode well for him. So he does sneak his way into the top 5 here. With that being said, moving on, talking about Suri, do you want to get us started on Suri, Connor?
Yeah, I think this is, again, another Suri episode that kind of similar to what we saw in episode 5. The total number of confessionals doesn't really line up with how good of an episode it was for Suri. Immediately we get her not getting a confessional about it, but sniffing out the fact that Stephanie was bullshitting her, and she can read Stephanie, and I kind of overlooked that for Stephanie's behalf because they've literally been on like several different seasons of Survivor together or other game shows together against each other. So like, I kind of saw that as like, okay, Suri has someone that she knows pretty well at this point and figured it out. But again, it was still a great thing for Suri because now it's additional knowledge in the game. Again, we get to see her really lock things in. Her, Ozzy, Rizzo. This trio that I would have not seen coming is just absolutely lock things up. They're rock solid. They couldn't be in a much better spot. And again, all of this isn't entirely what the episode focus was for Suri, because we see Suri go, hey, Dee could be scary. If we get a shot, maybe we should take her out. And then what happens? Suri gets her way, as she always seems to do. It's unbelievable just how many times she can pull the same shtick and get away with it.
Truly. I mean, she's also just formed great relationships this season. Like, Ozzy is like ride or die for her. She's got the Riz God pretty locked in with her. And like, yeah, I mean, she's been a target early on in the season, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really seem like people are looking at Suri and going like, she needs to go anytime particularly soon. And I would mostly credit that to the fact that she's not a challenge threat. She's not a fire-making threat. She can kind of be taken out whenever she needs to be. So why target her early necessarily? But we'll see how that actually plays out for people. If she's able to have people like Ozzy who just would probably go to the end with her, to be honest. So that being said, she doesn't have the largest presence on the season, unfortunately, which for a player like Sari, I think if she were to win, I would expect her edit to be a little bit bigger than it has been so far, and that's really the only thing that is holding me back from putting Sari higher on this list from an edit perspective. From a logical perspective, realistically, I just struggled to see a world where people let Sari make it to the final three. So those things kind of keep her out of the top spot for me, but at the end of the day, she manages to find herself really high on this list, just between her phenomenal gameplay so far this season and the fact that she's been, definitely a prominent character in the edit, and honestly, if anything, becoming more prominent in the last few episodes with her polyamorous relationship with Rizzo and Ozzy. What did they call it? The Wizard of Oz alliance? Cerise Wizard of Oz. I'll say that I feel like that alliance name is a little bit contrived, but oh well. Some people online actually seem to like it, surprisingly. Yeah, all around, I just think Sari has been great this season, and her edit has been very solid. So, Connor, do you want to introduce our next contestant?
Yeah, you guys already know what I'm about to do, so prepare yourselves. Because it's the man, the myth, the legend, RIZ-GOD, Riz God Baby. And again, at the top of our list, 3 spot this time. He's playing phenomenally. The content is flying onto our screens. His alliances, great. Decision making, on par. And he has access to all of the knowledge of all the advantages in the game, except for one, maybe, that Sari might not have told him. But that's his number one in the entire game, who's holding the potential only other key. So, again, just so many great things we can say about Rizzo, where, as much as I jokingly made fun of his, well, actually, on returning player seasons, the returning player who does the back-to-back doesn't always actually do that good. Maybe he's proving to be one of the ones who is doing that good. At this point, he's in the ballpark of being a potential single-digit back-to-back player, which I don't think has happened more than 3 times ever. So he is honestly putting himself in a pretty upper echelon of Survivor players. And then just jumping quickly back to the season, back to the recent episodes, he has been involved indirectly or directly in a lot of the recent votes and has not really seen too much negative content in any regard that I'm worried about.
Yeah, fair enough. I have loved Rizzo this season. I'm really honestly rooting for him to go far. I'd be pretty happy with him winning at this point. He's definitely a goofball, but he's a great player. I think his move to take out Charlie was obviously great, and now he's just positioned himself really well with his alliances, mainly with Sari and Ozzy, obviously. That being said, this episode didn't give me a ton to talk about for Rizzo. Just really a lot of the same great content that we've been getting from him so far this season. And I mean, looking at confessional counts, 28 confessionals is absolutely nothing to scoff at whatsoever. So yeah, definitely an all-time great back-to-back player. I guess the one other thing I wanted to mention with Rizzo was something that Jessica, I believe, or maybe it was Kaylin, my sister, who we also watch the show with, mentioned, was that this season kind of feels like one, like, fans versus favorites if there was just one fan. And Rizzo was the one fan, because, again, back-to-back player, so nobody knows who he is. He is, like, probably one of the biggest super fans out there. He's this young kid who's, like, very enthusiastic. It really does feel like, again, like, fan versus favorites, basically. Especially given the fact that he's aligned with, like, Suri and Ozzy, players who are genuine fan favorites, who are legends of the game, who also both were actually on the favorites drive on Survivor Micronesia. And I just feel like that's such a fun way of looking at Rizzo on the season. It definitely makes him all the more endearing, and yeah, again, it just makes me want to see him succeed. And I do think he is going to succeed to some degree, whether he wins or just makes it really far. I have him third on my list for a reason, so. That being said, Christian Hibiki, do you want to take the floor with Christian?
Yeah, Christian, I don't know necessarily where to place him for this episode. I almost even thought about moving him down one spot, but I left him in the same spot as you did, my number 2, just because, weirdly, this being not a good, like, super duper episode for him, where it wasn't necessarily bad, but just it being kind of almost a their episode for him, was the best thing that could happen. Any conversations of overexposure can't be put to a halt, but they can be simmered down when we do watch both of the two players that were dominating the confessional counts get a bit of a dud episode. And again, Christian was still relevant in the conversation of the episode, where we watch someone say, hey, we're not going to include Christian. He's in the middle. Christian immediately finds out. And what does Christian do? He's level-headed about it. He takes the very appropriate response of, okay, you know what? He doesn't want to include me. That's okay. We'll worry about this later, and we're just going to move on to focusing about now. So, I honestly was very okay with what we got from Christian this episode, considering it wasn't a whole heck of a lot, but it was enough that I'm not worried, and enough to kind of keep his place warm at the top.
Yeah, and actually, sorry, I'm actually going back to Rizzo here, because I was trying to remember something that entire time that I wanted to say, regarding him, but couldn't. I could be wrong, but were we not shown Suri telling Rizzo about, Stephanie's steal a vote? I thought that was actually something that happened in the episode.
Honestly, it might have, and I'm just not remembering it.
Because I seem to remember her being like, oh, you know, I wouldn't normally, like, be just like, I would normally, like, just hand this information out to people, but, like, I'll tell the Riz God. And then she tells him, and the Rizzo has a confessional about, like, how, oh, me and Suri, we know where every single advantage is in this game. Something along those lines. I feel like that happened this episode, but I could be misremembering things, because it's not, like, a vivid enough memory for me to be certain. Anyways, back to Christian. You know, he got some content at the beginning of the episode, or, like, near the beginning of the episode, I want to say. About something being leaked. I'm not sure. Oh, no. About how Aubrey supposedly forgot to play her advantage. She got a little bit of content about that, just kind of poking fun at Aubrey, I think. And then, like you said, the content surrounding Coach not wanting to include him on the plan. And that was basically the long and short of Christian's content this episode. 2 confessionals, nothing to write home about, obviously. But, like you said, that's honestly a good thing at this point, where overexposure was starting to become a very real concern. Now, he's at least had somewhat of a cooldown episode, to kind of be like, okay, maybe he's not completely overexposed. Again, he still has 42 confessionals, but, like, at the end of the day, I put the guy with 45 confessionals at the top of my list, so, and let's talk about Ozzy. Much like Christian, not a whole ton to talk about this episode, but he's got the alliance with Rizzo and Suri. He's got a ton of confessionals, mind you. Again, most of that is concentrated in one episode, so his overall edit, he hasn't necessarily felt like he's been the most overexposed player ever. Overall, mostly positive content. Sorry, I see your green bubble going, but I can't hear you. Are you speaking?
No. I don't know why it's going off, I'll be honest.
Oh, okay. Anyways, overall, fairly positive content. Again, aside from very early on, where his relationship with Suri was, like, overly obvious to most of the players, that wasn't necessarily the greatest thing in the world that you would want to see from Ozzy. But ultimately, his content since then has pretty much all been fairly positive. He actually has, like, a relationship with Emily as well that he can work with. He is, he's on fairly decent terms, I think, now at this point with Christian. So he definitely has connections that he can make use of. He's definitely getting a lot of focus without feeling overexposed. Again, you look at the numbers, 45 confessionals feels crazy, but 19 of those come from episode 1. If you spread out the rest of his content, I mean, it's really not that insane at the end of the day. So, yeah, I think, like, 6 confessionals per episode if you ignore the premiere, something along those lines. That being said, I wish I had more to say about Ozzy, but, like, this episode didn't give me a ton to work with for Ozzy. It's just more of the same. So he doesn't move, and he's been at the top of my list for the last couple episodes. But what do you think about Ozzy, Connor?
First, I'm going to start with your math, because I can do the calculation for it. You take 19 out of 45, you're left with 6 episodes at roughly 4 1/3 confessional per episode. It might be even a 4 1/3 exactly. I'm just estimating at that point. But yeah, about 4 an episode. Okay, let's look at where 4 would put him. Right next to Rizzo, right next to Rick, slightly above where Genevieve was when she was booted, slightly above where Coach and Emily currently sit. It's a much less exposed territory. And again, that is just taking out one singular episode where it was way longer than anything we've ever had in Survivor, and he went to every possible event he could individually go to, given how the writing of certain events could go, right? He physically couldn't go on the journey after having been in the Fight for Supplies. But he was at Tribal, in the Fight for Supplies, and then, like, just as a general character, important to that episode. So, moral of the story, I think with Christian, the conversation of overexposure can be starting to be like, okay, maybe this is just like a, he was so important early on, we can not worry about it anymore. I think with Ozzy, I'm not going to say it's entirely dead, but it should be close. I think The idea that the guy is completely overexposed isn't necessarily fair at this point. And again, he's playing well. He has put himself, again, with a couple of small things to worry about, but otherwise, great positioning. Great knowledge of the idols and advantages in the game. Strategically, he knows he's not the top dog, so he's put himself in a position where there's people around him to be able to help him with that, to help him with the social game. And he's made relationships and bonds with people that are typically those players, like, super aspects, I guess. Like, you don't look at Christian and go, yep, that guy's going to beat Ozzy in every immunity challenge. You do look at him and go, that's one of the best strategic social players on the beach. You look at Sari for that. Hypothetically, you'd be throwing Rizzo in this conversation about a month from now, right? So we're in a world where Ozzy has navigated the game far superior to anything we've ever got out of Ozzy. Oh, and what's the thing that we've always known Ozzy to do? We've always seen Ozzy be a physical player who can go out there and win a challenge when he needs to. The kind of player who can go out there and compete for immunity challenges and make sure that he gets to stay another day on the beach. Well, what happens with the immunity challenge? What's the result of the challenge that we get to watch this episode where, for the first time of the season, just one person is immune as an individual? That's that. Ozzy wins immunity. Ozzy does the thing that he's always done, and that's compete in challenges, not necessarily winning all of them, but being a dominant piece in all of them. So I see like a small amount of flaws that very much could be make or break for his entire season. And if those don't come back into play, why not Ozzy?
Real. The only thing I will say about Ozzy is I've been doing a few calculations, and his average confessional, like time per confessional, is actually less than Aubrey. At 15.93 seconds compared to Aubrey's 16.89. So, I've only actually been able to
8-9.
I've only actually properly calculated 4 of the players as far as their average confessional time, like per confessional, and Aubrey is in the lower half of those 4 players. But I'm curious to see where that math leads me, to see who has had the shortest confessionals. But so far, it's been Ozzy. So something to think about. Maybe not. I don't know if it actually matters.
I would say it's a good thing. He's doing more with less.
No, he's doing less with more.
No. He's had so little time to be on our screens, given the amount he's had, and yet he's still number 1 on our list for a reason.
But that, no, because that in and of itself could be a reason to not have him number 1. But also, he hasn't had a little amount of content. He's had the second most amount of confessional time.
It's really only 4.3 when you take out one episode.
So real, except I actually did the math with a calculator and be 3.7.
It's even less than there you go. I estimated. I just a little high.
Well,
so yeah.
I just added
moral of the story.
10 confessionals.
It's a good territory for him to be in.
When I was adding them up, so that was my bad.
There you go.
But anyway, next episode should be interesting. 2 people probably going home. That's as much as I'll say about what seems to be going on next episode. But I'm excited to see how it plays out.
Have you seen the episode title?
Yeah. that might give you a hint.
And we do also have the episode title for the episode following, which I think is interesting because I don't remember us seeing one that early before for a season. But
no, usually we see like them a couple episodes ahead. It's pretty normal. Actually,
I don't remember seeing like 2 episodes ahead at all times.
that's
Even this
pretty
season.
much the standard.
Huh. Well, I don't know.
Not even just for like Survivor, just for like most shows in general. So yeah, you're actually stupid.
Okay, well, we don't have the synopsis for the episode 9, but we do have the upcoming episode synopsis as well available. Which again,
We'll see what happens. That's all I can say.
yikes!
That being said, hope everyone's excited for the next episode. Because I'm cautiously excited. We'll see. It's gonna be a big twist, we've been told, so hopefully that's a good thing. Hopefully it's not a bad, cringe, awful twist. Like a do or die or an hourglass. But thank you for watching. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and the pod has spoken.